Minister, very good evening to you. Thank you for coming in. So you've been to the CBD. We've got accusations and counter-accusations going back and forth between police and the informal traders. But from your department's perspective, what is the way forward?
The way forward is that we must regulate the informal businesses and the small business environment. That's first and foremost. Two, we must register them to know who they are, where they are from. But three, we cannot allow people who are not legal in the country to conduct business. Every country has laws. And also the attack on the police or law enforcement agencies cannot be acceptable. We have agreed on that. It's non-negotiable for us. So what we, in the engagement, because we also met with the informal business associations, we have agreed that we are going to start a register that will lead to the regulation, but we are also going to work with the City of Johannesburg and SALGA, because it applies across the country, on the bylaws, to make sure that the bylaws are friendly for the space economy for people to trade in. Because for us, streets are economic spaces for the urban poor. But over and above that, there are other things that have to be addressed, which other agencies will come in and deal with it. The issue of hijacked buildings, because the conversation with the informal business associations, they were saying those buildings wherein the police are saying they are in counterfeit goods, and we saw them with our own eyes. Adidas for 20 rand, and Adidas Takey for 100 rand, and Nike, all the brands that are there. They're saying those buildings were closed, the owners were not there, and they've requested to use them, and for years they were not allowed, but all of a sudden the foreign nationals are using them. So the
reality of the situation becomes, and this way it's likely to get tricky, that you have to separate people who are involved in legitimate trade from those who are producing and indeed selling fake goods in the same area. So how clear-cut is the strategy to get that done in a way that limits as much harm as possible to those who are doing legitimate business?
I think it's straightforward in a sense that says, if we check in other countries within our continent, there are businesses that are not allowed to be done by foreign nationals. The limitation is only in South Africa, where we have not been explicit to say this kind of business are off limits to foreign nationals. And we, as a department, we are going back and check within the provisions of our law that says within this threshold, foreign nationals cannot participate, is a preserve of nationals. But we are going to be specific, like what they've done in Ghana, what they've done in Zimbabwe, in Angola, in Botswana. We're going to engage with Cabinet to say, Cabinet, if we're not definitive, there's going to be a problem. Because it's not only about what we have experienced today in the CBD. It's also about the people who are employed by the foreign nationals are not South Africans. So whose jobs are they creating for?
So if I'm hearing you clearly, what you are proposing, at least at this stage, is that perhaps looking into legislation which says foreigners in South Africa cannot engage in street vending, perhaps they cannot own some of the tuck shops in the CBD area. Am I hearing you correctly?
Yes, but it's not. The legislation is already there. There's a limit, there's a threshold that says when you're a foreign national to participate in business in South Africa, this is the amount that you need to invest in that business. And that excludes small businesses. But because of that gap that we were not definitive to explain which businesses, other countries have gone a step further, and they've not done it in terms of legislation going to Parliament, which takes longer. They've simply gone to Cabinet and passed a regulation and agreed to say this is the regulation. And we are working to consider what regulations do we put in place to make sure that we do like for like with our counterparts in the SADC and also in the African continent in Sudan.
Let's speak then about the sensitivities around how this cleanup, if you can phrase it that way, is going to be perceived and is already being perceived by some as an Afrophobic, xenophobic campaign. So how do you navigate that thin line between making sure that you're enforcing rule of law and not being seen to be targeting Africans?
That's why we were very clear in the day to say we are not saying the people who attack the police are foreign nationals. We're saying they were attacked by informal traders, and it cannot be accepted. So we're not talking about nationality. We're saying as you move further from there, other countries within the region, within the continent, are regulating it this way. Why should it be xenophobic when it's applied in South Africa, but it's not xenophobic when it's done in Ghana, in Nigeria, in Zimbabwe, in Botswana, in Angola, everywhere else? It's only xenophobic when it's South Africa? No, it can't be. It's done in Ethiopia as well. It can't be xenophobic because it's in South Africa. And I think as a people, we need to start to stop being apologetic. We need to protect the interests of our people without saying we cannot do. We're not saying foreign nationals must not do business in South Africa. We're saying there should be preserves for South Africans, because the small business economy is the driver for any economy. It's supposed to create jobs for our people, but it's not creating jobs for our people. If you check the statistics of of the people who are legal in the country in terms of permits granted by Home Affairs and the numbers that we saw there, they are not corresponding. So something must really give. And what giving is that we must regulate, and we cannot apologize for regulating. We must regulate so that there's law and order, but also that the economy of South Africa benefits our people. The brand owners were telling us to say between December last year and June and July this year, they've lost 350 million. That 350 million would be paid in tax. It will create jobs for our people. It will do a lot of things in the economy of the country. So because we are afraid of being accused of being xenophobic, we then say, no, we must be tread carefully. We are saying we are not doing something new. We are doing that which other countries are already doing.
And what is the feeling among these two communities then, in the Johannesburg CBD in particular, because that's where you've been, the locals and the foreign traders, about proposed further stringent regulations to just sort of make sure that we do operate legally?
The associations of small businesses from the South African ones are very happy with the regulation. Actually, they've said, we listened to your speech, Minister. You mentioned that you want to help us with bylaws. They have proposals on how bylaws must be structured and how the enforcement must go on. But they're also saying an unregulated industry is bad for any economy. Remember, everybody loses, because when the counterfeit goods are sold in the various shops and in the streets, the other person who does not have, who's an informal trader or a small business owner who does not have access to the counterfeit goods, cannot have a business, because people always go for the cheapest. Remember, there's always a market for cheaper products. So they are saying, let's regulate. And when we were asking the foreign nationals whether they are here legally, they did not want to commit. They were saying, no, we are applying. And when we are applying, we asked, why are you trading? And we said, why are you closing your shops if we are here? I'm here, I'm a minister, we're not doing a raid. Why are you closing shop? What are you afraid of? They say, no, in case you find that we've done something amiss. And I say, but what kind of a country allows that? There cannot be lawlessness on the basis that we're afraid of being called xenophobic. We are not saying people must go. We are saying there must be rules and everybody must play within the rules. But when our law enforcement say they have to enforce the rules and you attack them, that cannot be.
Let's come back then to our economic reality. Unemployment stats out late last month. Over 29% of this population in South Africa is sitting without a job tonight, as you and I have this conversation. A lot of those people ply their trade in areas like the CBD, selling whatever little they have. And in speaking to some of them since the violence last week, they've expressed a wish, a desire to grow beyond trading on the streets. What support is then available to them to make sure that we make these small businesses sustainable?
We've got a variety of support. First, there's with the informal traders, we have announced already that we want to do a register so that we can then assist them to organize bulk buying groups to negotiate them prices. But also, there are issues of access to markets. It's not everybody who's got access to proper market for their products. We are creating markets. We are also negotiating for those markets with them. But we can only do that when we can trace who is it that we are supporting, because you can't just support everybody, and whether that support can be measured. And we have set ourselves, we're going to then set an index of saying how do we get measured in terms of our support to small businesses, including the informal businesses. Some of the things that are a problem is the red tape, is them accessing goods easily, is also them getting paid on time when they transact with government. And we're saying those are the things we want to do. But also, government is the largest spender in the country. And we're saying government must put its money where its mouth is and we are going to set a category of goods which must be left for small businesses so that they can get a start and grow. We will provide the technical support to those businesses to ensure that by the time they reach the market with their product, there is quality of service and quality of product.
You talk about government being the biggest consumer to an extent of all these goods and improving things like the turnaround time for payments. We've heard this, I think, for the better part of the past decade, that government needs to improve on how quickly it pays its suppliers, because in the case of small businesses, often a lack of payment could lead to the closure of a business and unemployment for both the owner and any staff employed there. Why is it that all these years later, government appears to still not have mastered what should be a very simple thing of paying people on time?
I think I think I'll take it down to four things. The first one is that government did not realize that non-payment of small businesses is also affecting themselves. CIFA, the agency that I'm responsible for, part of the largest debt that is owed to CIFA, 90% of the debt, is because the people who owe CIFA are the people who are owed by government. So CIFA cannot go and collect because the government has not paid. So we are then having a responsibility. If CIFA must continue to strive, we must go and collect on behalf of the people who are owed so that we can also collect our money from the people who are owed. So that's the first part. But secondly is the traceability of the people who are supporting. You'll find that government has given support to a small business who gets a contract with a government department and does not pay it. But if we're doing aftercare support, we'll make sure that the invoice that is sent out is a proper invoice and they can be paid on time. So part of the things that we want to do is to expand the incubation, as the President has announced, so that we incubate as many businesses as possible to make sure that at least 3-5 years they are ready and stable to can do any other thing without any support, and they can have the cash flow that will sustain them enough to can take a 30 days or 40 days without payment from government. But we are saying, as a rule of thumb, government should be ashamed that it's not paying. And we are going to name and shame not only government departments, but entities that are not paying.
Let's talk about CIFA just very lastly as we conclude, because one of the things you mentioned in your budget vote last month was the issue around CIFA and how it's meant to help these small businesses. You've got, I think, a grant portion of the money from there, about 2.5 million rand per enterprise in this grant allocation. Who would qualify for that and how?
Okay, what we're doing, we have announced a blended financing model for CIFA. What we do with the blended financing model is that we combine the loan and the grant from CIFA. So when you apply for a loan, you'll also get a grant, so that we cheapen the cost of money or the cost of the loan, but also to enable your business to survive, that your overheads must be taken care of the grant, when rest your loan is going towards the running of the actual business. So we have announced that we want to fund 100,000 young entrepreneurs and innovators in that space. What we do with the funding will give both technical and non-financial support to these businesses, including incubating them to make sure that they run. So the criteria is that you need to have a business that has a potential to grow and to be able to create at a minimum at least 10 jobs, because we have proven the world over that small businesses have the potential to create an average of 10 jobs. And if we can create 10 jobs for those enterprises, let's say all 100,000 that we fund, can each one create 10 jobs, it will mean a million jobs in that goal. So over the 3 years, we are going to look after that program and make sure that we implement and we trace those people who are supported, both in terms of support, but also in terms of access to market, and also the technical support that you give to deal with quality, help them marketing their products, all the platform of services that they require.
Very briefly, please, away from the nitty-gritty of business, in the CBD today, you likened that attack, the assault on police officers, to terrorism. Have you not gone a bit too far?
No, not gone too far. Remember, the army protects the state in terms of its boundaries. The police protects the state in terms of us every day. So when you attack the police, you are attacking a state. And what do you call an attack on the state? An attack on the state is terrorism. We should not shy away of that. It cannot be too strong. Actually, it's a very mild word. We should call it worse.
Some say it was just a lack of preparation from police. That's why they were overpowered.
It was not lack of preparation. It was the fact that people were warned that the police were coming. And if you've seen what I've seen today, the police, it will need a whole lot of an army to clean up what we have to clean up in Johannesburg unless we put the regulation in place. That's why government, both local government, which is a municipality, province and national, we must work together to clear up the problems in the Joburg CBD. I'm told it is the hub of counterfeit goods. They move from Johannesburg to all the other cities in the country.
Okay, Minister Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Thank you for having us.